start off just talking about what it means to be ready to write or to be grant ready. This is not my computer, so it might be. Oh, and I probably should have done this first thing in the morning. Thank you very much, Institute Museum of Library Services. Thank you very much, MSCP, and thank you very much, DLDS, for helping us to fund this day. Thank you very much. I said it. Okay, so I'll ask you first, what are the biggest obstacles that you find to completing a grant application? Yes?
Time.
Time. That's very surprising to say that. Time. What else?
Focus.
Focus. What do you mean by focus?
Well, usually, probably most of us are in our office. We're usually interrupted like 16 times.
Exactly. I know what that's like. So being able to focus for a period of time and actually complete it, which is one of the reasons we're doing it here right now, where no one's going to bug you while you're trying to work on your application. I mean, on your proposal. Yes.
Well, I find that it's difficult to get to the application stage because of the way that they read out through letters of inquiry. I mean, you basically have to do a cold call in a letter to even get invited to apply.
That's right. There are a lot of obstacles put up. I mean, and it's obvious that there are obstacles up. We can imagine why that is. They're trying to weed out potential applicants. They get a lot of applications. And so people who aren't necessarily prepared or don't have a particular idea ready to go are more likely to be weeded out. So it is difficult. There are obstacles up. Anything else? Marie?
Figuring out how to route the money, who the fiscal sponsor is going to be. It can be complicated if you're a county agency with a 501c3 friends group. How to route that is a challenge and sometimes requires permissions.
Exactly. And by permissions, what do you mean?
Well, if it goes through the county, we have to go to the county board meeting and ask for permission to write a grant.
Exactly.
If it goes through the 501c3 sponsor, we have to make sure that that sponsor knows that we're applying, is willing to funnel that money through. So
exactly. So there's all that bureaucracy to a certain extent, and doing that at the last minute again feeds into this whole idea that there's not enough time to do these things. So that complicates things. What else? Any other obstacles that people have encountered? Yes.
I'll say that the projects we usually have in mind will increase basically the need for staff, and it's difficult to get a grant application approved that requires funding.
So from within your library, it could be difficult sometimes to find that approval process. So there's a lot of people that you have to get on board within your own organization, or also in order to have this happen. Anything else? Well, not surprisingly, I think I hit most of the things that we're talking about. Lack of time, lack of staff. A lot of us don't have a dedicated grant writer. We are the reference desk or the a million other jobs and the grant writer. The application process, labyrinthine. Just looking through the requirements, figuring out if you're eligible for it sometimes, it causes headaches. To know whether or not you're the right type of organization to apply for their grant. There's a lot of writing, actual writing, a lot of documents to collect. And then of course it's difficult to locate funders too. You need to know who you're searching for, and you need to make sure that you find a funder that is the right fit for you. And also there's a lack of time. Because of all those things. So, what would allow you to apply for more grants and funding in general? Pretend you can have whatever you want. Time machines, wormholes, whatever. What kind of things would make it easier?
A foundation.
A foundation. That's about as easy as a wormhole, I guess, sometimes. What else?
A template.
A template?
Yeah.
You're in the right place.
Time,
more time.
I was just going to say standardization and simplification of the forms.
Okay, wow, I love that answer.
In some manner, because they're all,
And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here, is to sort of standardize at least your part of the process and simplify it as much as possible, because it's not a simple process. If you take a look at, I'll skip ahead a little bit, but if you look at what goes into a grant proposal, there's a lot of different elements that are really difficult to master. And so one of the things you have to think about is A, you can't do it alone, because we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And you want to have a team of people who can do these different things for you, or with you, I should say. You've got to be able to sell an idea through your writing. You need to do project planning. You have to have a really concrete plan for what this grant is going to actually look like in order to sell it to a funder. If it doesn't seem like you really have a strong idea of what that final project is going to look like, they're not going to give you money, because a lot of funders get burned. They hand out money and then the project doesn't go off the way it was supposed to. It's not successful. Maybe the person looking for the grant money just wasn't sure what they were trying to do. So you've got to think beforehand and make it concrete. Worry about staffing, budgeting, arranging location, publicity, evaluation at the end. They want to know what success is going to look like. You also need to do academic research. You need to find out who's done similar programs before. You have to show why it was not successful or how you could be more successful than those previous programs were. And then finally, after you do those three pieces, find the right funding relationship. So that is a lot of work to do. And what you want to do, and the reason we want to start putting together things before a grant is actually announced, is so that you can get those pieces in order without a deadline hanging over your head. So you want to write your proposal before a grant is even announced so that you can be grant ready when it is announced. Okay? So, if we put together our grants ahead of time, you'll be able to save on time. And the other thing is you can avoid chasing grants. And what do I mean by chasing grants? Anyone want to take a stab at that? I know none of us have done that. Yeah.
Oh, somebody just sent you an email, right? Look, I found this great grant. The deadline's 2 days from now. Can we do it?
Okay, yeah, okay. So the deadline is way too close for you to be able to get anything together. What else?
I know I've gotten similar emails of like, oh, this grant looks really exciting. Let me now design a project to fit the grant instead of the other way around. And that just doesn't seem to work.
Why does it not work? What's wrong with that way of putting things together?
Because you're not addressing your real needs,
Right.
the community needs.
Okay. You're chasing money, and you're not actually putting together something that is necessary for your library and something that's going to satisfy your community needs. So a lot of people will probably do something like this. They see an RFP, they write their proposal, then they contact the funder, and then they go off and do their thing. What I think people should think about is, what does their community actually need? Okay? If you start from that foundation, that's a really strong foundation. Because not only, obviously you want to be doing something for your library and your community that is actually helpful to your library and your community. But it's also going to be evident to the funder that you're actually doing something that is organic to your community and that you're actually poised to do. Okay? So think about what your community needs are and your library's mission, what your library's needs are, and what your library can actually accomplish. You don't want to take on a task that the library is not able to actually accomplish. So think about community needs, and then often, I don't particularly like this language, but often grants are posed as what is the problem you're trying to solve. So we're going to use that language, but it could be just a great project idea for your community. It could be something that's really, just makes the library a great place to go. But we're going to use that language because a lot of grants use that language. So what is the solution to a problem in your community? Once you identify that problem and a possible solution, you start to write your proposal. And then once you have the proposal in hand, you can research your funders. And Kathy is here, and we may even, if we have time at the end, if people have got a grant proposal together. Well, not yet, you will have a grant proposal together. We could go back onto the Foundation Center website and just take a look and see what we could find now that we've got a concrete proposal in front of us. And once you write the proposal, research your funders, you go and rewrite your RFP. And when I say rewrite, I don't mean rewrite from scratch. You'll see, I'm going to break down what your typical grant proposal looks like, and you should be able to use or reuse or cut and paste even, and I've done this, cut and paste pieces of a proposal into a new proposal. You should be able to reuse 85%, 90%, 95% of it. It really should be more of a sculpting to what the RFP is looking for, especially if you've done your homework as far as finding a funder whose needs meet your needs. The funder is really looking to fund the kind of project you're looking for. If that's the case, you should be doing very little rewriting. You should be able to use a large chunk of that proposal the way it is. Okay? So hopefully, have I sold everybody on this idea? I think everyone, does that make sense? So, here are the typical elements of a grant proposal. And not everything is up there, and not everything can be up there. And like I said, you're going to have to look at that RFP when it comes out and see exactly what they want. But here are the things that I'd be willing to bet money are going to be in most of the RFPs that you see up there. You're going to want a narrative where you have a statement of need or a problem to be addressed. There's going to be a section where you work out the scope of services or scope of work. That's basically the proposed activities or services that you're going to provide. They're going to want to know what your goals and objectives are, what your outcomes are going to be, what is success going to look like if the grant is successful, what evaluations do you have in place to measure whether the grant was successful. Sustainability, organizational capacity, everyone's favorite part, the budget and budget narrative. Attachments such as resumes, board lists, organizational or staff charts, flow charts, or logic models. Is that enough work to do? So there's a lot to do there. Let's talk about this bottom part here. Whoever your grant lead is, whoever your main grant writer is, whoever's going to be the leader of that project, they should have these things ready to go, okay? Long before any RFP comes out. They should just have it all year round. And you want those ready to go because the worst thing in the world is you put together all this other stuff. You write the narrative, you write the scope of services, you do a sustainability plan, you put together the budget, and then one person on the team doesn't have an updated resume, and you're waiting on that resume. Or you have an outdated organizational chart. And so your grant is late or incomplete because of something minor. So have these things on reserve, both paper and digitally, and make sure they're up to date so that when it's time to go, that's the no-brainer part of it. That's just ready to go and to be attached. Yes?
When you talk about the organizational or staff charts, do you mean for the entire institution, or do you mean specifically a working group for that project?
It could be either one. Most grants are looking for an organizational chart for the organization. Okay, and as far as what the organization of the actual project looks like, that's probably going to be taken care of in your scope of services. You'll talk about who's going to be staffing the project and what role each member of the staff is going to take.
So what are they looking for then with the org chart? Or do they want to see that there's buy-in, like that there's a direct line of the organization to people further up in the hierarchy?
Frankly, I'm not even sure really what they're looking for there. I'll be honest. I mean, I think they're looking to see what your organization is about. I've never thought of that before. Anybody have an answer to that one? I don't have an answer to everything at all. But it is, I will say this, I haven't seen a grant where they haven't asked for that. And it's a fun thing to get too, especially when you're rushing to meet a deadline, because no one ever seems to have it, or an up-to-date one for some reason. But I will say they do almost always ask for that.
I know our county, Caroline County recently applied for the MSD grant to expand for an extra duty center.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that grant, they had to give an organizational chart. I think MSC just wanted to know, like, well, who's actually going to be in charge of this
Sure.
specific new duty center, and then just see all the way up the line, how it goes all the way up to the superintendent of schools.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was useful. When I looked at the whole grant, I thought, yeah, it seemed like a useful piece of it.
Right.
That laid out who's actually going to be managing it.
Right. And it sort of says a lot. It says a lot about your organization and how your organization is structured. You also have to think about the fact that a lot of nonprofits are applying for this. So they want to see what how the nonprofit is structured. Also, it's an important piece for someone who's offering money to organizations that I'm familiar with.
And that's just reminding me that a lot of our grants include partnerships with community organizations, so we need their resumes, their
Yes.
charts, et cetera, as
Yeah.
well.
And sometimes an MOU that's signed, a partnership
Yes.
agreement that everybody's committed.
I should be adding more and more to it. It's somewhat scare people,
Yeah.
but
Or
yes,
letters of-
MOUs.
Letters of support, yeah.
Letters of support is not up there. Why is letters of support not up there? I should put letters of support should be up
Can
there
I
too.
have another?
Yes, go right
I've
ahead.
always asked for our
IRS letter of determination.
Yes.
For 501c3 status.
Right. Okay.
And they'll also want to see if you have any other funding as well.
Yes.
If you've got any other support elsewhere.
Right. And we will hit on that actually later in the slideshow. But yeah, that's another thing that they're always looking for. And again, these are things that you want to have in line and ready to go long before you see an announcement of any sort. So then when you do get that announcement like, oh, this is due in 2 days, you're going to be ready to go. Any questions about what's up there? Or any other suggestions for what should be up there?
I have one more thing.
Yeah.
I also keep our audit, our most recent financial year audit, because usually you have to submit either the 990 or the most recent audit as well.
And I hope someone from DLDS is taking notes, because I'm going to add these things for the next, yes, thank you, Dennis. Yes. Oh, and I should say, I may have had a little too much coffee this morning, so it was a little, I may have skipped over a couple things. One, this slideshow and the worksheet that's in front of you will both be available on the Maryland Grant Writers website. And if you don't know how to access that, I'm going to tell you how to access it at the end of the workshop. And if you're not on my contact list yet, let me know that you'd like to be added to it, and I'll add it. I may just add all of you, whether you want me to or not. I don't know. But so this will be available there. And you also may have noticed that we filmed the panel discussion this morning, and we're filming right now. And both of those will also be up on the website for your review again if you need to, or if you have colleagues that are interested but couldn't make it here, you could refer them to the website and they'll be able to watch it there. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So let's actually get started on writing the grant. So like I said, you really want to make sure that what you're working on is worthwhile for you and your library, because it's a lot of work. And so before you do anything else, you want to think about what your library's vision is, your library's mission, what is your project idea, and how the project meets the following goals in your library's strategic plan. How does it meet the community's needs? And then describe how your project fits the library's mission and strategic plan goals. So I'll give you an example from a grant that I recently wrote for DLDS with Liz Sunderman. And I'll just be using these examples throughout just to give you an idea of what I'm looking for. And what I should say is, these are really compressed, really condensed, because I'm putting it up on a PowerPoint slide. And what you all should do on your worksheet is write whatever kind of notes you need to take this back home and really get the project done. You could write as much as you like, as little as you like, in bullets, in full sentences, in phrases, and comic book bubbles, whatever works for you. These worksheets are for you to take notes on and write it however you like. So I kept it really short and sweet just to give you an example right there. So our library's vision, or DLDS's vision, is to be collaborative, innovative, and transformative. Our mission is to provide strategic leadership, resources, and programmatic support to Maryland libraries. The project idea was to teach 4 to 7-year-olds the basic principles of computer programming through an open source robotics platform. The project meets the following goals in DLDS's strategic plan by providing innovative STEM programming and focusing on underserved populations. It meets the following community needs. There are few computer science classes available to K-12 students, especially in urban and rural areas. So that gives you an idea of what I'm looking for there, but you're going to sculpt it to whatever your particular idea is. And so what we'll do is, on your sheet, it is page 2. Let's take 10 minutes, see if that's long enough. If you're working in groups, feel free to talk out loud. This is about collaborating and thinking, and if you're alone and you want to work with somebody nearby, whatever you want. I'm going to wander around, and if people have questions, I'll answer them. We still have more time, but I had one question from a group that I thought it would be helpful to other people. I bet you're going to have the same question. 4 and 6, the question was, how are those different? And what I'm looking for in 4 is, what are the actual goals in the strategic plan? If you look at your strategic plan, the goals tend to be those bullet points. Okay, they get a lot more specific. So can you pick out very specific goals on a strategic plan that your idea hits right on, is a dead on target for? And with 6, I'm thinking more of the big picture. How does it fit into the big picture of the strategic plan? And one other thing I noticed was walking around, I noticed a lot of people going online, which is a good way to find your strategic plan if you don't know what it is off the top of your head. I'm sure we all walk around knowing our library's mission and vision. It's in your wallet or your purse, and you just can whip it out whenever you want. But if you don't, that's a good place to look. And if you can't find it online, I'm sure you can find it when you go back to your library, or you can contact us, because we have records of a lot of research plans also. Okay. If you can't find it right now, I guess you can sort of guess. Okay, we've got 5 more minutes. And if you didn't answer everything, absolutely right now, obviously you could add to that. I want to get through, we're probably not going to get through the whole packet today, but I want to get through most of it so that you leave here with a really large chunk of the proposal done. So if you don't get every question on every page done, try to hit every page and look through it together so that when you do come back to it, you don't have a lot of work to do. Because like we said, it's a lot easier to do it in here than it is when you get back to your library. I'll see a lot of smiles. So the next piece is the statement of need. This is really where you start to outline what the problem you're trying to solve is. And you really want to lay the groundwork for describing the problem and also showing an understanding of the geographic location it's going to take place in, that you know your community, and the population that the program is going to serve. So here are some questions that should allow you to focus on what the state of need should look like. First, what is the problem that must be solved? Is there anyone who that question doesn't really work for, or does that work for most people? Okay, good. So we'll continue to use that language. Who is affected? And you want to describe them as much as possible. Race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, age, sex, gender, where they live and work. This is going to be important to funders because some funders are going to focus on particular geographic locations. Some funders are going to focus on particular populations. Some funders are going to focus on particular types of programs. A lot of them will focus on a mix of those things. And so when you get to that researching the funder stage, this is going to become very important, and it's going to make your research a lot easier. 3, how do you know this population is affected? You say there's an issue, you say there's a problem there. How do you know for sure, and eventually how are you going to be able to prove that? And then, has this ever been addressed before? How? What was left undone, or what could be done better? Some of this you may not be able to, some of these questions may be a little bit too complicated to answer here right now. From talking to people, I know some people have already been thinking very deeply about what project idea they have. So you may have these pieces already in place. If you don't, you might want to sketch out what what you do know or what you anticipate, and then you may have to go out and do some research after the workshop. But you can at least start to sketch this out. So we'll do the same thing. Was 10 minutes enough time to answer those questions on the first page? Is that about right? Okay, so we'll do 10 minutes again. I'm wandering around. If you have questions, please ask me them. I may interrupt you again just to share a question I think everybody might have if it's sort of a general thing. So 10 more minutes. I think we're pretty much there. I put my examples, I should have put my examples up before you. There are my examples from the grant that I was talking about before. Lack of computer science, education for K through 12 students, young children, who's affected, young children, urban and rural populations, young girls, African Americans, Latino populations. How do you know this population is affected? We did our research, and I want to promote this one right here. MSDE reports is really helpful to tap into that, and if you need help tapping into that, we can help you do that. Governor's report and the White House reports, all on this topic of helping young American students become more comfortable with computer science and with programming. Has this been addressed before? Yes. In Europe with strong results, so we'd like to replicate it here. We haven't seen it in the States yet. Our next page, where are we? We're on page 4 of your packet. Urgency with an exclamation point. Here is where you want to highlight your moral appeal. Make the funder care without overdoing it, but make them care. You need to demonstrate the urgent need for your services. There are a lot of people out there looking, a lot of organizations looking for money. Why is this particular problem urgent? Why is this organization, your organization, able to solve this urgent problem? Remember, there are far more problems to be solved than there is money to solve them, so you need to make the issue stand out without making things seem hopeless. So there's a balancing act there. You want it to be urgent, but if it's hopeless, why should we give you money? The problem can't be solved, so you're out of business. So I find the way that you walk that tightrope is to compare the cost of inaction on the problem versus the benefits of timely intervention. That's really the way to make it urgent, but not hopeless. So cost of inaction versus the benefits of timely intervention.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the second question, or the cost of benefit. Presumably, our individual projects will be localized, and presumably, if they are successful, they can be brought to scale. But obviously, whatever I'm going to do at my location is not going to solve the problem of the greater society.
Right.
How do we address that in a way that is honest and reasonable, but still kind of speaks to the bigger solution?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, you're talking about a program in one county in Maryland. How is that going to solve this issue on a large
And the
scale?
county's even bigger. What if it's like a branch?
Sure,
So.
sure. You need to be honest about it, and you need to talk about the fact that we're starting small. The point of grant money is to start. It's a startup for nonprofits. So you could talk about the fact that even though this is a small project in a small area, this is well, you don't want to use the word experiment, but you know what I'm talking about. It's an opportunity to try something new. You're going to write about it. You're going to let other people know about it in your community. You can be an example to larger communities. Talk about where you're going to share this information. When you do achieve your goal, who's going to know about it after you? Because it's got to start someplace. So you talk about the problem on a large scale and what needs to be solved on a large scale, and then you show how you're going to start to chip away at it. Does that make sense?
And that it could be a model for other
Exactly.
communities.
Right. That sort of crystallizes it, what I was trying to say. Yeah. So this could be a model. This could be something that other people start doing. We're going to do it here first. So does that make sense? Yeah. That's a great question. The examples that I put up there, Why is the problem urgent? And you're going to see exactly the question you asked. I talk about it in sort of a really big global, or at least national aspect, but the program itself is going to be very small. 3 branches, if we get. So employers need workers with strong computer science skills. Unemployed workers tend to lack these skills. Other countries are outpacing the US. So this is on a pretty big scale as far as problems go. What will happen to the population if the problem is not addressed? We'll have an unemployable, disaffected generation. That's pretty bad as far as problems go. What is the cost to the greater community and society as a whole if the problem is not addressed? High unemployment, jobs move overseas, US companies fall behind other countries' industries. Okay, again, it's on a big scale, but we're going to start solving it, a little bit at a time. What are the benefits to the greater community and society as a whole if the problem is solved? Okay, again, we're being positive here about how we're going to solve the problem, not necessarily only about the negative impacts. We'll have a diverse, well-trained, and engaged workforce. And who cares? Who cares about this? You want to ask yourself this question for 2 reasons. 1, these are going to be your potential funders. And 2, your potential funder is going to care about who cares. Okay? If your funder is IMLS, it's going to mean a lot to them that the White House is interested in this particular problem. And you're going to write about that. You're going to let them know who cares about this issue, because that's going to be important to them. They want, their IMLS sign on whatever great project is going to happen, especially if the White House is going to be paying attention, or the governor's office, or particular businesses. So you want to think about that on two levels. Any questions about those questions? Has 10 minutes been workable? Okay. So why don't we work on the next page, and I'll, again, circulate around the room, and if you have questions, let me know. So the next thing we're going to look at is your research, which we all love because we're librarians. That's my favorite part. What supporting data, statistics, or research exists about this issue? So it's time for your literature review. Although I should say, it shouldn't be, it isn't necessarily just a literature review. It's not necessarily just government reports and academic journals and things like that. I was actually talking with Carroll County about a grant that they have in mind, and about electric vehicles. And somebody produced a documentary about trying to travel across the state of Maryland in the electric vehicle. Just from watching that, we're able to put together, do you have the sheet, James? Just from watching the documentary, we're able to put together about 3 pages of leads, including 2 companies that funded the documentary, which I'm willing to guess is probably also willing to fund or possibly fund electric vehicle chargers. So it's not necessarily just in journals and articles and reports. You want to learn everything there is to know. I bet you probably are pretty good, are experts already, but you want to know as much as you can about the topic, and you might be surprised at where your leads come from, both for the funding side and for the writing of your proposal. What personal stories and testimonials have you collected? And what other evidence exists of a problem? Okay, because you want to really prove that this is a problem and that it does need to be solved. And I think people have different feelings about this. I tend to write very heavily on the first question. I really like to prove with data and statistics and research that this problem exists, and to talk about it in those terms. I would highly recommend that you mix things up and that you don't rely by any means solely on testimonials and personal stories. I think you really want to have those facts and figures there to back you up. So if you're going to do a little bit of both, do a little bit of both. I really rely heavily on that data and research. I think that's really important to have there. So just keep that in mind. And you can see from my example there that with the grant I'm talking about here, I didn't even go there. With the personal stories or testimonials, we really looked at. It also depends on the funder you're working with. You know, you have to kind of gauge what they're looking for. But for the funder that we were really trying to attract to the grant, this is the sort of thing that's going to work with them. So MSD reports, academic journals, governor's office reports, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Report, those sorts of things. Here are some research resources that I found have been really helpful. Number one on my list is FedStats. I love FedStats when I'm running grants. You can search by keyword, topic, or state with links to federal agencies that maintain relevant statistics for things like agriculture, crime, demographics, economics, education, energy, environment, health, income, labor, safety, and transportation. I probably just hit on every single idea that's in this room in one way or another. You use FedStats, you're getting federal statistics from federal government agencies. That's as authoritative as you're going to get. And you're also, by searching there, you're going to also get an idea of potential funders. Because a lot of the government agencies that produce reports on these topics are also going to want to fund grants around these topics. State agencies and local government reports are also helpful. You'll find that if you contact the agencies, a lot of them are really eager to share their reports with you, share their information with you. It's satisfying to know that the report that you're producing is actually being read by somebody. So if you contact those agencies, they will be, I think most of the time you'll find people eager to send the information you're looking for and even help you further in what you're looking for. Again, potential funder also. Third on the list, should come as no surprise, libraries. Use your own library resources. A lot of times it really cracks me up that we provide so many things for our patron and never think of, wait, we could use it ourselves for our own for our own uses. So I had to put that up there, even though it's probably a no-brainer for you all. Census.gov. Again, really important, especially for your population. You want to describe who your population is. You want to show that you know who they are. You want to make sure that as you describe the population you're going to work with, that it meets, it agrees with what the population that the funder is looking to work with. Census.gov is invaluable for that. You could look up demographics, median household income, spoken language, poverty levels, employment statistics, and so much more. And I have to say, FedStats and Census.gov have gotten so much easier to use, and they've really produced excellent websites. All of the federal agencies, more and more, really have websites that have tons of useful information, up-to-date information, and they're very navigable. So I highly recommend both of those as places to go. Foundations produce reports. And another no-brainer should be that if you are applying to a particular foundation, you should read their reports. And when you write your proposal, you should include their reports in your proposal. If you're applying for a grant or money from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, quote them. That's a really good idea. And it also makes sense because it shows, again, that you and the funder are on the same page about what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then local organizations focused on your population or problem. Your local chamber of commerce, for instance. Local churches, local schools, local businesses are also places to look for information, not necessarily academic research, but information that could be used for your grant proposal. So with those up there, anybody have anything else that they want to add? Other leads that they've used for grants in the past that are really helpful that's not up there? Anybody? Oh, state stats. Statestats.gov. Is that right, Dennis? Did I get it right?
It might be ending state stat, but I can't remember specifically. But if you just Google...
If you Google state stats. Okay, and that's for Maryland. It's the equivalent of the FedStats website. Okay. Let's see. For this particular section, we might do a little bit shorter, maybe 5 minutes, only because what I think would be helpful is for you to sort of fish around, maybe look at these sites, not necessarily, write paragraphs long for this, because this is probably something you need to come back to. But look around, brainstorm places that you think you'll find these kinds of things that you might need. Put some bullet points down for future reference. Does that make sense to everybody? Sure. Will that work? So we'll do maybe a little bit more than 5 minutes, but we're not going to do the full 10 minutes for this one. So take it away. So the next major section of your grant proposal is going to be the scope of work. And you'll notice things get a little repetitive. On top of all the work you have, all the writing you have to do, and the project planning, and the budgeting, and the research, your grant applications tend to also be very repetitive. From the point of view of the granting organization, if you've ever read grants, well, that reminds me of another thing. I'm just going to do a little sidestep here. Another great way to gain experience and to really get better at writing grants is to read lots of grants. And everyone in here is eligible to start reading IMLS grants right now. If you go to the IMLS website and you look, they are looking for reviewers all the time. They cannot read all the grants that come into them. And that is a great way to learn what to do and what not to do, probably. And looking at things from the other side, it does get a little repetitive. You're going to see some of the questions here you've already answered. And when someone is reading your grant, reviewing your grant, they may pick up different pieces of the grant at different points as they're reviewing it. So even though you may have talked about who your participants are and where they live and work and what their demographics look like in the narrative, you're going to do it again in the scope of work because that might, they may use these different pieces at different points during the review process. So that's why it is a little repetitive. For our purposes today, we're going to kind of move through this pretty quickly so we can get more things. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on the population again for the scope of work. Here are some of my examples. Like I said, you've seen this before. Our 4 to 7 year old children, urban and rural populations, etc. You're going to look at the outreach. This is really important, and this we haven't hit on before. And this is extremely important. If a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound kind of thing? Okay, you may have the best project idea in the world, but if you can't get the word out and you can't reach the population you're trying to target, it's worthless. Okay, you're going to be sitting in a room by yourself. So you need to also plan out how are you going to inform them of those services and how are you going to recruit people to participate. This might be, these two particular questions might be repetitive for some of your ideas, but for others it may make sense. It may be just a matter of marketing for the first one. For the second one, you might actually be recruiting people to take part in the grant program you're putting together. You may be recruiting people to actually work at your library or do a particular training program. So for some people, this makes sense as two separate questions. For others, you may just need to answer the first and sort of see above for the second one. We're also going to look at what services or activities are going to take place. This is where you're going to actually describe the activity in detail. What is it actually going to look like? So you're starting to take your abstract idea and turning it into a concrete project. Remember those 4 cubes I had up there? The different pieces of what a grant really is? This is the we're starting to move into the project planning part of the grant. And you want to take that abstract idea and make it concrete. Because again, the funder wants to know that this could really happen. And they need to see on the page, somehow you have to make those words turn into something they can actually see and feel and hear if they're going to give you money to make it happen. So this is where we move from the abstract to the concrete. When will the activities or tasks take place? How often will the activities take place? What makes the activities innovative or responsive to identified needs? This is also important to you in your library because you want to think about You want to think about what your scope of work is going to look like. Can you really accomplish this? The idea that you have when you first walked in the door today may change as you work through these questions. It may get bigger, or it may need to get smaller. So we're working on two fronts here. One, we want to describe to our funder what we're trying to do and make them see it also. And we're also trying to figure out for ourselves exactly what this is going to look like. Because you all know, an idea that you have 2 o'clock in the morning may seem great, and then when you start to put it on paper, or even more, when you start to do it, it sort of morphs and may get ugly. Or it may get better. Yes,
And
Dorothy.
just to say, that's why it is so helpful to have a team.
Yes.
And a sounding board, people as a sounding board, is this
Exactly.
realistic? Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a great comment. And beyond just your team right now, too, you want to go back to your library and start, when you've got this proposal, start talking to people about it. They can offer constructive criticism on what can and can't happen, and they also may have leads or ideas that you haven't thought of. So as many people as you can have read this, get it out there and start talking about it. I know there's a tendency, and I feel that feeling sometimes too, that you've got this grant, it's a great idea, and you want it to be yours, and you're afraid someone's going to run with it. I think it's so much better to share it and get as many people looking at it and commenting on it and helping you with it as possible. That's really the best route for making these things work. Is there a question?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find in general that grant writers are more successful with existing initiatives over potential?
I don't think one or the other is more likely to work. I really think it depends on the idea. I think if you have, if you can prove that you've been doing something well, and especially if you have data to back it up, makes your grant so much more powerful and more likely to be successful. On the other hand, a granting agency is not going to want to just extend what you're already doing. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You have to show them that you're going to do something new with their money, that you're going to do something beyond what's been done before. So that's what you have to think about. If you do have an existing program, how is this going to be different? How is this money going to be used to expand it, or in some way make it better than it's been before, make it bigger, make it different? Does that make sense? Any other questions? So I think that's the scope of services. Like I said, this is where it gets more concrete. So we had this idea of having children learn how to do more computer science and programming. And what the actual activity is going to be is children guide robots through a maze of their own design by creating algorithms using shapes and colors on a physical interface. What makes the activities innovative and responsive to identified needs? This is really important. It's a really important part of the application. Early learning computer science skills, in particular that it's for young children. We don't normally teach these things to really young children. There's no screen time involved. It's not on a computer. It's actual physical robot, physical interface. And there's no reading, math, or English language skills necessary to teach these kids programming in this particular activity. So those things make it very innovative, and those are the kind of things that granting agencies are looking for. What makes it different than what's been done before? Your location, I think that's pretty straightforward. And then we'll do staffing separately. So in your packet, what we'll work on is the population, the outreach, so that's page 6, the activities, services and support, and location, that's page 7. So we're going to work on 6 and 7 in one fell swoop. Okay, I know a lot of people are probably still working on this section, but we're starting to run out of time. So what I want to do is go just review the next few pages to talk about what the point of them are, what their point is. We understand. So we're going to run through and look at the packet. I don't think you necessarily need to do these sections here. I think they're a lot more straightforward than the other pieces we've done so far. And then what I want to look at, and maybe you could talk briefly about, is the outcome-based evaluation. And then we'll wrap this up. And hopefully you all stick around a little bit longer so that we can talk about the day and then what we're going to do next. how we continue to work together and help each other find more funding for our library. So let's just take a look at page 8 in your packet. I've got some questions up there for you to think about as you fill this out. It's basically a staffing page. You've got 3 columns, and what I'd like you to think about is what skills or expertise do you need to do the project, and not necessarily only to do the project, but also to administer the grant. Think about all the things that are going to go into it, not just the program itself, but who's going to supervise activities, who's going to deliver activities, who's going to evaluate the activities, who's responsible for the administrative tasks. So think about those things as you're filling out this sheet. If you fill out the skill, you put a skill here or a role responsibility here, and you don't have a person in the middle, then you probably need a partner. Okay, so that should be assigned to you, that you don't, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go for it. It doesn't mean that your library is not the right organization to do this program. It just may mean that you need help doing it, and that's a really good thing, actually. A lot of funding organizations like to see partnerships because, from their point of view, there's more bang for their buck. They're helping 2 organizations with the same amount of money. Okay, so that's a good sign. If you've got that middle column there, that means you need to be looking for partnerships, which is page 9. Who else can help you accomplish your project? And this has got 2 columns. Potential partners. Think about government agencies, other nonprofits, civic groups, another library. If you're a public library, you might want to work with an academic library. Again, you're looking for what they can add to the grant, how they can help you accomplish your goals, and also, again, it makes it a much more attractive grant because you've got a complete package there. And then think about what their relationship to the project is going to be. Don't go out and look for partners just to look for partners, of course. You want that partner to really be cohesive and organic to the project. Page 10, everyone's favorite part, the budget worksheet. I think I've listed everything you could possibly think of there, but probably not. There's probably some things, additional things that you'll want to work in there, but very, very important part of your grant proposal, and it's going to be looked at very carefully. I just thought of something that I heard over here. Robin and Kathy were talking about, should we get the dual monitor? Or should we just get one monitor? Should we get the big computer or just get the smaller one? Our tendency as librarians and educators is always to try to do things to go small, to do things on a shoestring budget. We do that well, and it's a great strength of ours. But you're doing all of this work to get the big money. So ask for what you need. Ask for more than, well, don't ask for more than what you need, but ask for what what you're afraid to ask for, but what you actually, you're going to actually use. Okay? So get the dual monitor, get the bigger computer, get 3 workstations, not 1. Ask for all the staffing that you need. A, you deserve it. Okay? You don't need to do that. If you're going to do all this work, get what you need. B, I think it reflects better on you if you're asking for what you really need. A funding organization is going to know what you actually need to get the job done. And if you put in less than what you really need, it actually doesn't reflect very well on you. It looks like you don't really know what you need to complete the project. So get what you want, get what you need. Budget justification is page 11. Okay. Here is where you're going to you are going to write a narrative about your budget. Okay, so on your budget page, you're just going to have numbers, right? You're going to have, let's see, materials and supplies, $3,000. Well, what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything to the funder. They want to know how you're going to use it. So the budget justification is where you tell them how you're actually going to use it and how it fits into the project you've described so far. You're going to write it in a narrative form, and it's going to be another way to make very abstract ideas concrete. Okay, your scope of services where you're describing your activities makes it concrete. This also makes it concrete. And again, there's 2 pieces to it. for you, I think this is another place where you get to see, does this really work? Does this really make sense? Does this abstract idea that I have, can I turn it into a concrete thing that actually is going to work? It also gives you an idea of, again, your scope of work and what you really need. So the budget justification is a really important piece for the funder to see and also for you to figure out what it is you're trying to do. And then, like I said, all those things I think you could work on your own, and hopefully you'll have time to do that. I want to take maybe 5 minutes for outcome-based evaluation, because this is really important, especially for the IMLS. A lot of funding organizations want to know ahead of time how you're going to evaluate the work you do. And this is really valuable for you too. Again, this is a way to figure out what you really want to achieve. What is success actually going to look like? A lot of us have great project ideas, but then what's the end product actually going to look like when the program's done? What is going to change for the people who participate in that program? How is it going to transform their life? It's a hard question to answer, but I think it's a really important one. So let's take 5 minutes to work in our groups on that one, and then we'll wrap it up. What change will take place in skills, attitudes, behaviors, and or knowledge? How we measure and compare pre-program and post-program skills, attitudes, behaviors, and or knowledge? And what tools or expertise is necessary to measure and record success? How we use the data you collect. And here's a couple of examples. For the projects that I talked about earlier, we're looking for those skills: debugging, sequencing, order of operations, attitudes. That could be a really important part of what changes for participants in your program. For the children who participate in ours, we want them to just enjoy themselves while doing science. That's a really important thing, because hopefully they'll have a positive attitude and continue to want to pursue science as an endeavor. Behaviors: determination, ability to make mistakes and try again. How will you measure it? We're going to put together an observational rubric of the children's play to see if they display those skills, display those attitudes, display those behaviors. And how we use the data you collect. We're going to produce a white paper and also plan for a larger statewide rollout of the program if it is successful. Okay, so let's take 5 minutes to sketch that out, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. Let's turn to last page, page 13. Lucky number. And one last piece that I think could be helpful to you all is you've done all this work, and now you can easily take that work and turn it into a little elevator speech. You've sculpted your idea, you've got everything you need. Hopefully you know what your scope of services are, you have an idea of what you're going to do with your narrative, you're going to budget things out. Now, if you look at page 13, it's a good exercise to say to yourself, well, what is the problem? And can you write it out in one sentence? Who is affected? That's going to be your population that we wrote about. One sentence. Why is it urgent? Give yourself 1 or 2 sentences. And how will your organization solve the problem? 1 or 2 sentences. So then you've got a total of approximately 5 sentences that if you do wind up at a conference with a funder, or you do find a way to talk to somebody or get somebody on the phone or write a short email, you can tell them very succinctly exactly what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it. So just to give an example, what is our problem? Maryland students lack programming skills necessary for the 21st century workforce. All Maryland students, but particularly urban and rural populations, are at risk. This is urgent because students will not find work after graduation. At college, it's too late to begin to learn computer science. They must learn these skills now. And we can solve this problem because we can provide strong computer science foundational skills through fun and innovative programs like Primo Programming, in which children learn to construct algorithms while playing with a cute robot. Okay? In one paragraph. So there's your elevator speech, there's your abstract. You take all of this work and kind of bundle it into something that's very palatable, and you can say quickly if you have the opportunity. And so hopefully that's helpful to everyone. Anybody have questions about what we did or questions moving forward on this particular template?
Is the template available online?
The
Can we get more templates from you?
You can get as many templates as you like. That's the website for the Maryland Grant Writers, Library Grant Writers. You can access it through Merlin. You'll see at the top. Nini, what does it say? It says, I think it says Grant Writers, I think, at the top of the screen, right?
Maryland, MD Grant Writers.
MD Grant Writers. So if you go to this web page, you'll see it there, and then it'll go directly to the Google site that I put together. And it's not up there right now, but it will be up there by the end of the week.
And you don't need that index page because Maryland Community Hour organization.
Okay. And the PowerPoint will be up there. The template will be up there. A video of this morning's panel discussion and what we did right here, in an edited version will eventually be up there.